28 men sailed into the Antarctic in 1914. Their ship was crushed by ice. They were stranded for 497 days in winter at the bottom of the world, with no rescue coming and no one on Earth knowing where they were. Every single one of them came home alive. This is how. It started as a sound, a low groan in the timbers, then a crack somewhere deep in the hull. The men on deck stopped what they were doing and listened. They had been listening for this sound for 9 months. In the summer of 1914, a man named Ernest Shackleton placed an advertisement in a London newspaper. The exact words have been debated for over a century, but the spirit of it is remembered. Men wanted for hazardous journey. Low wages, bitter cold. Long hours of complete darkness. Safe return doubtful. Honor and recognition in case of success. 5,000 men applied. Shackleton chose 27 of them. His goal was the last great prize of polar exploration. The South Pole had been reached 3 years earlier by Roald Amundsen. Robert Falcon Scott had died returning from it. What remained was the crossing, to traverse the entire Antarctic continent on foot from one coast to the other, something no human being had ever done. The ship was the Endurance, named after Shackleton's family motto, "By endurance we conquer." On the 8th of August, 1914, 4 days after Britain entered the First World War, she sailed from Plymouth and turned south. She would never come home. The Weddell Sea is one of the most treacherous bodies of water on the planet. It is shaped like a vast bay carved into the Antarctic continent, and its currents trap pack ice in a slow, clockwise rotation that can hold a ship for months. Or forever. By December 1914, the Endurance was already pushing through ice floes. By January, the floes were closing behind her. On the 19th of January, 1915, the Endurance was beset. The word beset is a polar term. It means the ship is held. Not damaged, not sinking, but held. Surrounded by ice on every side, unable to move forward, unable to retreat. Shackleton hoped at first that a shift in the wind or a fracture in the ice might free her. The wind did not come. For the next 10 months, the Endurance drifted with the ice. She moved over 1,000 miles, locked inside a slowly rotating field of frozen sea. Carried by currents the men could not see. They lived on board. They tended the dogs. They played football on the ice in the long polar twilight. They photographed each other and the ship and the strange beauty of a world that was very slowly trying to kill them. A man at the bow played a banjo at night because Shackleton had insisted they bring music. He believed the men would need it. Shackleton walked through the camp every night, checking on each man, learning each man's weak point, who was struggling, who was drifting, who would need to be near him when the time came. He was not, by the standards of polar exploration, a great explorer. He had failed twice, but he was, by any standard, an extraordinary leader of men. In October 1915, the ice began to move differently. Pressure ridges started to form. Places where one sheet of ice was being driven against another. The ridges built up around the ship. The Endurance began to lean. Then she began to creak. On the 27th of October, Shackleton gave the order to abandon ship. They saved what they could. 3 lifeboats, sledges, the dogs, tents, a small library of books. Shackleton insisted on this. Frank Hurley, the expedition photographer, broke into the flooded hold to retrieve his glass plate negatives. He chose 150 of them. He smashed the rest with his own hands so he wouldn't be tempted to carry more than he could afford. They could not save the Endurance. She was crushed slowly over 3 weeks. On the 21st of November 1915, the bow finally went under and the ice closed over her. There was nothing left where the Endurance had been but a crack in the surface, already freezing. 28 men stood on the pack ice of the Weddell Sea, 400 miles from the nearest land. They had 3 small boats, a few months of supplies, and no way to contact the outside world. Nobody knew where they were. Shackleton's plan was simple and almost impossible. They would camp on the ice and let it carry them north. When the ice broke up, if the ice broke up, they would launch the boats and try to reach land. For 5 months, they camped on the ice and drifted. The food ran low. The dogs were shot, first to save food, then to be eaten. Penguin and seal kept them alive. Their clothes never fully dried. Frostbite was constant. In April 1916, the ice broke up beneath their feet. The journey from the breaking ice to Elephant Island took 7 days. 7 days in 3 open boats in the Antarctic Ocean in April. The boats were under 23 feet long. They were not designed for open ocean. They were designed for short trips between a parent ship and the shore. The seas were enormous. The spray froze on their faces and on the oars. At night, they lashed the boats together and tried to sleep, packed against each other for warmth, soaked through. Killer whales surfaced near them in the dark. The water temperature was below freezing. To fall in was to die in minutes. On the 15th of April, 1916, after 7 days, they sighted Elephant Island. It is difficult to describe how forsaken Elephant Island is, but it was land. Shackleton understood immediately that they could not be found on Elephant Island. No ship would ever come this way. The expedition was overdue, but the search, if there was one, would be looking in the wrong place. They could not stay. They could not be rescued. So he made his decision. Shackleton would take 5 men in the strongest of the 3 boats, the James Caird, and sail to the nearest place where rescue was possible. That place was a whaling station called Stromness on the island of South Georgia, 800 nautical miles to the northeast across the Drake Passage. The Drake Passage is the worst stretch of ocean on the planet. The wind there moves uninterrupted around the entire globe, and the waves it builds are the largest in any sea. To sail it in a 22-foot wooden boat in winter, with 1 sextant and 2 chronometers and no engine, was something no one in the long history of seafaring had ever attempted. They left on the 24th of April, 1916. The men were soaked the entire time. Their hands cracked open. The boat had to be bailed constantly. On the 5th day, ice formed so thickly on the rigging that the boat became top-heavy and was at risk of capsizing. They had to crawl out onto the deck, in the gale, and chip the ice off with knives. Frank Worsley, the navigator, took only 4 sun sightings during the entire voyage. He calculated their position by dead reckoning, using a sextant in conditions that should have made it impossible. On the 8th of May, 1916, in fog, they sighted land. They had sailed 800 miles in an open boat in winter across the worst sea in the world, and they had hit it. But they had hit the wrong side. The whaling station at Stromness was on the north coast. They had landed on the south. Between them and rescue lay the unmapped interior of South Georgia, a range of mountains and glaciers that had never been crossed. Going around the island by sea was impossible. The men were too weak. So 3 of them, Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean, set out on foot. They had a length of rope, an axe, and a few screws driven into the soles of their boots for traction. They had no map of the interior. They walked for 36 hours without sleeping. They climbed 3 mountain ranges and several glaciers. They slid down 1 slope on the seat of their trousers because they had no other way down. At one point, Shackleton stopped and said he had felt that there was a 4th man walking with them. All 3 of them had felt it. On the 20th of May, 1916, in the early morning, they walked into the Stromness whaling station. The station manager did not recognize them. When Shackleton said his name, the man did not believe him. When he was finally convinced, he stepped back into his office and closed the door, and his crew later said they could hear him weeping. The men on Elephant Island were still there. It took Shackleton 4 attempts to reach them. The first 3 ships he commandeered were turned back by ice. He spent more than 3 months trying. He did not sleep properly. He did not stop. By the 4th attempt, a small Chilean tug called the Yelcho, the ice had finally relented enough to let a ship through. On the 30th of August, 1916, the Yelcho approached Elephant Island. The men on the island had been waiting for 137 days. They lit a signal fire of their last reserves of seal blubber. Shackleton, on the deck of the Yelcho, counted them through binoculars as they came out of their shelter. 1, 2, 3, 4. And when he reached 22, he is reported to have said very quietly, "They are all well." Every single man came home. The Endurance itself was found finally in March 2022. She was discovered upright on the floor of the Weddell Sea, 3,000 meters beneath the surface, in almost perfect condition. The cold had preserved her. The brass letters of her name were still legible across the stern. By endurance, we conquer.